Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Side Hustle Ideas. I am Bill, the company's expert. Thank you for joining me on this beautiful Monday morning where I am. It is going to be an extremely hot day today. First, it's going to be hot all week, and so it's going to be really interesting. We had a spring that was about 2 weeks. We went from winter, like the Arctic, into the blazing hot summer in about 2 weeks, so that's wonderful. Anyway, welcome to Side Hustle Ideas. And the title of today's episode is called Services Are More Profitable Than Products and Easier to Compete With. And we're going to be talking about that. If you are thinking of doing a side hustle, you are perhaps considering doing product sales or perhaps doing services, providing services. We're going to talk about the differences, pros and cons of both. And also, we're going to talk about the disruption that's being caused by AI and ChatGPT and things like that. And we're going to be talking about perhaps taking a couple of questions before the end of this half hour. But first, I want to make a totally cold attempt at doing an intro here because I don't have any kind of structure for this, and it's time I should get some structure. So let me say this. I think that entrepreneurship is absolutely magical. If you are someone who's worked as an employee, you've had jobs throughout your life, that's how you make money, you can maybe appreciate how awesome this is. Because what it means is that you don't have to worry about being laid off. You don't have to worry about dealing with bad bosses or coworkers that you absolutely cannot function with. All of that is basically over because you learn to turn your own value into money. And at the same time, as if that isn't enough, it taps into a creativity that you have. So you get a chance to do something where you're in charge. That means that you can do it the way you want, you can do what you want, and you have control over how you do it. And you can adapt what you do to cater to your strengths and your weaknesses. And that's a really good thing. So I think it's something that's absolutely magical. And the beautiful thing about side hustles in particular is that side hustles are a way to step into that world. It's a way to stay working as an employee, but kind of put your toe in the water of the world of entrepreneurship just on the side to see if it's for you, to see if you can make it work for you. If you could bring in another $500 a month equivalent, $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month, hey, that's something that's really good. And you also get a sense of accomplishment as you do it. And if you're extremely successful and you get a taste of it and you want to take it to the next level, it's a way to get into the world of entrepreneurship and be a small business owner, whichever way you're going. You can do both those things, but it's a way to get into it in a relatively low risk path. So that's why I think it's awesome. And that's why I do this live stream. I'm doing these once a week, every Monday at this time, at least for the next couple of weeks, certainly. I'm going to be at this time on this day, so hopefully you will join me. So let's talk about the topic of today's episode, which is services versus products. I've done some videos on this on my channel before, but there's many things to consider when you are deciding what to do. Okay, that's the most obvious thing, and that's the name of this live stream, Side Hustle Ideas. What should you do? And obviously that's determined by many, many factors. One of them is, should you do what you're going to do as a service or as a product? Okay. Now, obviously product is where you make something and then you sell it and you're dealing with units, right? Something that you've created and that you sell. It could be a physical product that you have to mail to people. It could be a virtual product that you can deliver over the internet. But in either case, you're dealing with units, right? How many units of the product you sold. Services, I'm not sure if there's an official definition of products and services, but because when we get to the digital world, it does kind of muddy the water a little bit. But services, I would define as anything that you charge per unit of time. So like if you charge by the hour, or it requires your time to deliver, okay? There's other ways you can define it, but I think that's the best, okay? It could be something that's customized to somebody, but once again, the defining characteristic is that you do it by the hour, right? Or by the unit of time. We've already got people in the chat. There's 18 of you guys here. Thank you for joining me today. Let's see. I'm gonna take questions whenever I feel like it. At the end, I'll try and get to all the questions. But if I'm on a roll, I'm just gonna continue what I'm saying. But I will take this one. Someone says, "Hi, good evening. I'm a worker working as a telecom engineer. Please suggest any idea for moonlight for a telecom engineer." Well, I've never been a telecom engineer myself. I assume that's something to do with telecommunications or telephony, right? In the old days, back in my day, you would be somebody that works with telephone lines. You'd be doing BIX panels and patch panels and things like this, and repairing equipment and assigning numbers and setting up systems, and later on digital phone systems and stuff like that. So I'm assuming that you have a qualification in what would be today considered a technologist. You're a technician. You could even have an engineering degree, but I doubt it. Usually you'd have some kind of technician degree or certificate. And that means that, you could make any type of electronic product. Now, in this day and age, just not to talk about this forever, but just, the 2-minute version is that it is so easy to create a product that has to do with, like, say, a printed circuit board, a PCB. If you have the ability to design it, you can download the software, you can create it on your computer in software, you figure out the circuit, you figure out the physical, the way that converts into, say, a PCB, a printed circuit board. And then built into the software is the ability to sort of press a button and send it off to be manufactured. And as I understand it now, you can even get the enclosure, switches, buttons, knobs, readouts, displays, all that kind of stuff specified. So the entire product is designed virtually. It goes off to be manufactured halfway around the world. And then you receive in the mail X many units of the product that you designed and ordered. And then you can then sell that product if that's what you want to do. So products are definitely within the scope of what you can do. Perhaps there is a tool or a little gizmo that would make your life easier as a telecom engineer. Maybe you could start by creating those and selling it to colleagues or people that you know within that little world that might find it useful. Alternatively, you could provide services. If you're a telecom engineer, you could sell your services to consumers or to businesses. Maybe they are installing a new phone system and they need people temporarily with the installation or something, but they don't want to hire them as permanent employees. So, maybe that's something to look into too. There's all kinds of possibilities. And what we're talking about today, this is going to segue into what we're talking about today, which is if you have to make a decision between products and services, okay? Now, some generalities for everybody here. I love services. I'm going to admit that up front because in my career, I've dealt mainly on the service side. I've dealt on the product side, product manufacturing, like large industrial equipment manufacturing, smaller equipment manufacturing. But what I have observed firsthand is that services have a couple of advantages. Number one, to start up a service business, it is a lot cheaper. Because take the example of the telecom engineer here. What do you need to sell services as a telecom engineer? You need the tools perhaps that you already own or that you already have. You need a few screwdrivers, sockets, tools that you could buy at a hardware store or electronics store or maybe an industrial supply outlet. That doesn't cost the earth and the sky to purchase. Okay. I suppose you could even rent them. You may already have them. But beyond the tools, you don't really need much else. Now, if you have a vehicle, that would help, right? Maybe you already have one. If you do, great. If you don't, you might have to get transportation. That might be something else. But these are not insurmountable barriers to entry. Okay. On the other hand, if you're selling products, and it required some kind of manufacturing operation to create a product of some kind, that can be very expensive for an individual if you're starting it up, right? So one advantage right off the bat is you can get started a lot easier. There's lower barriers to entry if you're going to sell services. Secondly, the great thing about services is that it's a lot easier for you to go head to head with competitors in the service business. In the manufacturing business, that's a lot harder, or the products business, that's a lot harder, because if you've got competitors that are a lot bigger than you, they sell a lot more volume of products, it's very hard to compete with them. Their costs are always going to be lower. They're going to be more efficient. They're going to have brand recognition, all this kind of stuff. It's very hard for you to break in. There's higher barriers to entry to get into that. But services, if they just need someone to come in and hook up a phone, or they need someone to come and troubleshoot why their digital phone system is not doing the messaging properly or something, maybe it's tech support, maybe it's someone has to physically go on site, whether they're dealing with a technician from one company or they're dealing with a technician from another company, doesn't really matter to them. They both send a person, and hopefully the person is knowledgeable. The person, is easy to communicate with. They're friendly, right? That's basically the things you need to win at that game. And that's not that hard to do if you know your stuff. So that's the great thing about services. It's a great equalizer. I don't care if you're a multinational corporation. You can go, as a single person company, you can go head to head with a multinational corporation and win. Okay? Because let's say the multinational corporation, let's say you're living in a city and they have an office downtown in the center of the city, right? Well, you might live 4 blocks away from your customer. Already you have a competitive advantage. You can be there in 2 minutes. The multinational corporation can't, right? Geographic proximity is your competitive advantage, right? So in that little geographic region, that area that surrounds you, you have a competitive advantage. You're actually superior to a multinational corporation if you can provide the same service. Okay? And if you're a telecom engineer, maybe you work for a larger company, when they get service calls, they'd be sending you, right? Well, now, if you go in business for yourself, you get a service call, you send yourself, just like as if you worked for the multinational corporation. The only difference is that you're working as an independent now. And that also has several advantages. Number one, you care much more about your customers. You might not have as many of them as a multinational corporation. You probably won't. So the ones you do have, you care. It's important to you, as opposed to the big company where, they lose a couple, they won't notice, right? So there's some definite advantages to services. Services are easy to start up. It's more of a level playing field with big competitors. There's a lot of things in there. And the only thing that matters is, do you provide good service? Either comparable service or superior service. And usually the great competitive edge is your customer service ability. How friendly you are. Do you lie to customers or not? When you say you're going to be there in 1 hour, are you there in 1 hour? Right? Things like this. Can you fix the problem? Can you do what you said you're going to do? Or do you give people the runaround? It's things like that that really determine who wins in the service business. So there's many, many advantages. And hopefully that explains the title today, because I did want to cover that as an independent topic. So Cisco, so working for Cisco, okay. I don't work for Cisco, but my impression was they're more of a networking company than a telecom company. But I guess technically they're a telecom company because they do like under ocean communications and networking, stuff like that. So I guess, telecom. Anyway, you would know. Ben Noble says, okay, I create websites for businesses as well as do digital marketing. I work full-time already as a marketing, doing WordPress. I'm small, but would love to replace my full-time job. I agree about services. My current client said he'd rather work with an individual and dropped his creative agencies because they wouldn't pick up the phone or respond to emails. Well, yes, exactly. And we see this every day. Now, somebody once said that if you call a company and the person that picks up the phone can't actually help you. They have to forward you to somebody else. You're dealing with a bureaucracy. I can't remember who said that, but it's true. And, you know, on the one hand, I understand why larger organizations are structured this way, but on the other hand, it's not as good for the customer. It's not a good customer experience. What you would like to do is call the number, and the first person that picks up, they can answer your questions. They can tell you what you need to know. And if you need something from them, like you need them to come by and provide some service, they say, sure, you know, it'll be me and I will be there in 45 minutes. And then they show up in 45 minutes and do what they say they're going to do. They're knowledgeable, they're friendly. And, you know, you what you see is what you get. That's what a lot of customers would like. Do they get that all the time with large organizations? A lot of the time they don't. Now, I'm not saying that all small organizations do provide that, but this is a real, you know, area of opportunity for people. If you've dealt with, I don't know, in some particular business, some industry, you've seen how bad the existing players are. You know, maybe they don't have a lot of integrity. They lie to you. They say they're going to do something and they don't do that thing. Maybe they say it's going to cost this much, and then by the time they're done, they charge you this much, you know? Maybe you ask them a question and they can't answer, and they say they'll get back to you, and they never do, you know? Like all these issues, this is what really sells services. So if you could do a good job at that stuff, you know, forgetting about the operations side, like, you know, the actual telecom business, if you can do this stuff, the customer service stuff, well, you have a competitive edge over other players, maybe more established players in the business. If you have a closer geographic proximity to your customer or your client, you have a competitive advantage over maybe the multinational corporation, right? Depending on what you're doing. So these are some real advantages that make services very attractive, and you can start it up relatively easily. Okay, you don't need millions of dollars to start up a service company. So those are some of the advantages. Ben Noble says, what's the best way to advertise myself since my project experience is limited? Can't use my full-time project. And then heading into a meeting, but we'll listen to your answer later. Okay. Well, unfortunately, Ben, that's going to depend on precisely what you're doing. I mean, there isn't a one-size-fits-all answer for every possible, like every industry and every place around the world. It depends. Now, what you need, the first thing you need is you need to get an answer to that question. In your particular business, how do people make sales? How do they get the word out? How do customers make the decision that, oh, I'll go with them? Okay. Sometimes it's because customers have heard the brand name. Okay, that's a trusted name. Like, I've heard of them, so therefore they must be good. Maybe that's all it takes. You know, in some cases, that's what you get. Other times, no, maybe there's a personal connection. Oh, I know this person. I used to use them a while ago. Now they work for that company, and I like them. So whenever I need it, I'll call that company because I know that person, right? Sometimes that's it. Other times, there's no personal connection or history with the vendor or the firm. What they do is they look it up in some kind of directory, or they do an internet search, or, you know, they have no connection whatsoever. So they look, and that's the first name that comes up, or the name that makes the best impression, right? So there's many different ways that you could convince somebody to do business with you. Sometimes it's word of mouth, right? You know what I mean? So there's many different methods here that could all be valid depending on what you're doing. So the first thing you have to do is you have to get an answer to that question. Now, this brings me to another point, and that is that it's a lot easier to get into a business when you're on the inside of it. So if you're working as a telecom engineer and you maybe start offering those services independently or privately on the side, if that's something you can do, you know, it's easier to do that than say you work as a chef, but you've just gone to school to learn to be a telecom engineer. You've never worked as a telecom engineer, and now you try to start up a business on the side as a telecom engineer. You're now breaking into that business from the outside. You don't know how it works. You don't know how people make these decisions of how to do business with whatever vendor. So it's a lot harder. You may figure, okay, well, I'll go to all the industry events, and that's how I'll promote myself. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Depends what you're doing. Right? But the first thing you have to do is you have to get an answer to that type of question. Okay? And if you're wondering how to do that, the short answer is, there's many different ways, but one great way of doing it is informational interviews. Especially if you're on the outside, informational interviews are the way to go. And I really should do a live stream sometime about precisely how to do those. Maybe I will in the future. I have, right now, that's covered in this course right here, the Get Hired course. If you're interested in that. Where's my little, I had a little blurb here. Here we go, or a little picture. So link in the description, this course, it fully describes how to get a job. It fully describes how to do informational interviews, okay, how to network and get informational interviews. Sit down with CEOs, people that are high up in organizations that are in the industry that you want to learn about. In this case, you can go to either the providers, the vendors, the companies that provide the service, or you can go to the clients, like if there's institutional clients, okay, companies that buy those services from other companies that provide them. You're interested on the client side, how they think, what they consider, who's their current default supplier for that if they have one, and why do they go through them? Will they give you a chance to say, hey, give me a chance, I'll show you, I'm really good. Informational interviews are the way to get that information. It also is a subtle way of sort of getting your name out there, although that's not the primary purpose. But check into that. Furious Cheddar, great name, says, if I have a service that I know is highly valuable and makes sense by the numbers, but the customer is not convinced, do I really have a service? That was a struggle for us. If I have a service that I know is valuable and it makes sense, do you have one? Yes, you are offering one. Is it a success? No, if I'm understanding how you're describing it. And it sounds like the issue is, how do you convince the customer to do business with you? Well, that's precisely what I was just talking about. The best way to find that out is informational interviews. You ask people, what is it that you look for in, a supplier? If someone came along and tried to convince you to give them a chance, what would be important? What would you need to see, right? Would you need a personal connection? Would you need to see a sort of reference list of all the clients they've worked with? Do you want to see a list of different services they provide and it has to have certain things on it? Do they have to have certain capabilities? Do they have to have other things? Like, I worked in a business where in order for you to be considered to work with some institutional clients, you had to have a lot of things. You had to have a verifiable safety certification. You had to have, certain environmental policies, rules. You had to have certain quality rules, policies, systems in place, and all of that had to have been audited and verified by various third parties. So you had to do all this stuff that would qualify you to do business with your clients. Now, knowing if they need to see that or not would be very important. It would be really important before you make the decision to get into that business, right? Because if the reality is that all the people you want to do work for, the only way that they could hire you officially would be if you had gone through an official vetting system and you demonstrated, by being audited by all these entities that you have this safety standard in place, this quality standard in place, this environmental standard in place, these HR policies in place, things like this. If you knew that in advance, that would inform you whether you should get into that business or not, right? So that's as simple as getting one interview with, say, a general manager or divisional manager at that company. Relatively easy to do this. That's pretty easy. You go to one interview, you have one conversation with someone who's agreed to talk with you. They say, sure, yeah, come on in. I'll answer a few questions. And then you say, like, if someone was wanting to get in and provide those services, like what would be the types of things that you'd be looking for or that you would require before you could sort of engage them. Things like this, right? That's one conversation that you need, and that can reveal this stuff. So I'm a big believer in informational interviews. I've used those throughout my career, and to get all kinds of information, and it's a really powerful tool. Ben Noble says, last question, do you think being local matters in a software side hustle like mine? A software side hustle? Well, that depends. For products, it shouldn't matter, in theory. For services, it will matter more, because if you have to support your software, for example, or troubleshoot or provide customer service, depending on what the client expects or wants, they may want someone physically on site. Okay? Sometimes also, if you are local, it does provide a certain amount of validation. They believe a little more that you're not some fly-by-night scam operation, operating from another country, halfway around the world. They don't know who you are. They can't verify who you are. If you're local, if you say, like, look, I'm just 2 streets down, if you have any questions, like, feel free to stop by, or I can come and visit you on site if you have any questions, if that would be more efficient for you. That's not a problem. That's something I'm happy to do, and I think it would be a better experience for you guys, certainly, to do that. It may not be necessary if you just have a couple of questions, but if you want me to come down, I could do demonstrations of how to use the software. I can answer questions in person. Might be a little better, right? That would have some value, right? But it depends. It depends on what you're doing. You see, this is the thing. There's no universal right or wrong answer, even for software. Okay, you might be physically capable of being halfway around the world and providing it, but does the customer see it that way? Will they still regard you in the same light? That's something that you would have to get, and I would suggest doing it through informational interviews. There are people at these organizations that have all these answers. All you got to do is sit down with them. You send them a message. You say, hey, I'd very much like to get your expert opinion about your industry and some of the details of, what you think. I don't know, just questions about your industry. Would you be able to spare me half an hour, something like that? And you can ask them, like, when you hire contractors, or if you were to hire a contractor, in the past, what do you look for? Is this important to you? Is that important to you? Is there something else that's maybe important to you that you would need to see? If someone approached you and said, I provide this, do you have a lot of, a huge approval process you have to go through? What do you look for? What's important to you? That kind of thing. And you can get the answers to these relatively simply. So hopefully that makes sense. But yeah. So wow, I'm almost at the end of my allotted time here. So I didn't get into the AI question, but we can perhaps cover that next time if people are interested. Let me just say this. Right now, I'm sure have heard of this by now, but one of the very, very disruptive things that's going on right now is AI. I believe it's poised to revolutionize a lot of things. In the same way that Google search did, like 25 years ago, and the internet did a few years before that. It doesn't mean, everything is going to completely change from top to bottom, but there are going to be some changes coming in. And I think it's really exciting because it seems to be the first really disruptive change in a very long time. I was there for the internet revolution. I was there for, Google coming in and stuff. These things made huge differences. when what they used to call the Web 2.0, like social media came in, things like YouTube and Twitter and Facebook, LinkedIn, where you could publish your own content. That was another revolution. It changed a lot of things. This is proving to be, in my opinion, it's going to be another one. It's the first one since, I would say, social networking came in. So there's a lot of interesting things going on. We've had a few things since. We've had like drones and, stuff like that. But this, I think, is going to be even bigger. And it's going to be even more interesting how it changes traditional ways of doing things. And it's nothing to be afraid of. Some people are afraid. What I was going to talk about, and I'll just mention this briefly, is that for many, many years in the world of entrepreneurship, people have been talking about disruption. They throw that word around a lot. It's a management buzzword, flavor of the month buzzword that everybody loves to drop. People use this word in the stupidest situations. They talk about the most mundane, boring, traditional, non-disruptive, non-revolutionary things, and they use the word disruption because it's just nice sounding. Well, here we have something that's, I think, is actually going to be disruptive for the first time in a long time. And I see a lot of people panicking. The people that talk about change is good and you've got to embrace the future. And, these people are panicking. And I think it's hilarious, And then you get the fear, right? Oh no, things are changing. It's going to change things. Yes, I know. It's great. It's great. It's going to change things. Mostly, like anything else, mostly it's for the better. There will likely be some negative stuff that comes with it, as with every change. Right? When they introduced the automobile, I wasn't around for that, but when they introduced the automobile, obviously it's better than a horse and cart in many, many ways. It changes a lot of things. But, oh no, people are going so fast that you have more traffic accidents and deaths. Right? The fatalities, So yes, we can mitigate it with seat belts and things like this. But, like any change, it's disruptive, it's messy. But I think there's some incredible opportunities right now. And a lot of entities out there that have money to spend and at the same time don't have a clue what they're doing, especially with new technology, are businesses. And if you can go in there and use some, chat GPT or AI based thing that will help them do what they want to do, if you can help them with that, tremendous opportunities right now. So there's another idea for everybody. We'll maybe talk about that more next time, but I've got to get rolling. Thank you to Furious Cheddar. Thank you to Ben Noble. Thank you to, I don't know how to say that. I'm going to take my best shot here. Salmiakanta. Sahu. Thank you to you and to everyone who commented and showed up today. You guys are awesome. And I will see you next week on Side Hustle Ideas. I wish you the absolute best of luck. Take care.